song tonight. Number 815. Beautiful robes so white, beautiful land of light, beautiful home so bright, where there shall come no night. Beautiful crown I'll wear, shining and bright o'er there, yonder in mansions fair, gather us there. Beautiful robes, beautiful land, beautiful home, beautiful band, beautiful crown, shining so fair, beautiful mansions bright, gather us there. Beautiful thought to me, we shall forever be thine in eternity. When from this world we're free, free from its toil and care, heavenly joys to share. Let me cross over there, this is my prayer. Beautiful roads, beautiful land, beautiful home, beautiful band, beautiful crown, shining so fair, beautiful mansions bright, gather us there. Beautiful things on high, over in yonder sky, thus I shall leave this shore, counting my treasures o'er, where we shall never die. Carry me by and by, never to sorrow more, heavenly store. Beautiful road, beautiful land, beautiful home, beautiful band, beautiful crown, shining so fair, beautiful mansions bright, gather us there. Number 140. Number 140. After this song, we'll have our opening prayer. Wonderful story of love, tell it to me again. Wonderful story of love, wake the immortal strain. Angels with rapture announce it, shepherds with wonder receive it. Sinner, oh, won't you believe it? Wonderful story of love. Wonderful, 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 wonderful story of love, wonderful story of love, though you are far away, wonderful story of love, still he doth call today. Calling from Calvary's mountain, down from the crystal bright fountain, in from the dawn of creation, wonderful story of love, wonderful, 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 wonderful story of love. Jesus provides a rest, wonderful story of love. For all the pure and blessed, rest in those mansions above us, with those who've gone on before us, singing the rapturous chorus, wonderful story of love. Wonderful, 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 wonderful story of love.
Pray with me. Heavenly Father, once again, we're thankful for this day. We're thankful for the many blessings you've blessed us with. Father, we're thankful for each precious soul that's here tonight, Heavenly Father. We ask you to be with each one of us, Heavenly Father, as we sing praises to you and hear your word proclaimed, Heavenly Father. We ask you especially to be with those who are not able to be here with us tonight, Heavenly Father. There may be those that are traveling. We ask you to be with them and watch over them and keep them safe. Father, we continue to ask your prayers on those who've been mentioned, who are sick, those in the hospital, those who can't be with us for various reasons. Father, we ask you to be with those and remove those things that are blocking them from being with us. Father, as we go through the rest of our service tonight, we ask you to be with us and help us to focus our minds on the reason we're here, which is to worship you, Heavenly Father. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
The invitation song is number 603. If you'd like to mark that, number 603. Before the lesson, we'll sing number 489. 489. I know that my Redeemer lives and ever prays for me. I know eternal life he gives, from sin and sorrow free. I know that my Redeemer lives. I know eternal life he gives. I know that my Redeemer lives. He wills that I should wholly be in word and thought and deed. Then I his holy face may see, when from this earth life freed. I know that my Redeemer lives. I know eternal life he gives. I know that my Redeemer lives. I know that unto sinful men his saving grace is nigh. I know that he will come again to take me home. I know that my Redeemer lives. I know eternal life he gives. I know that my Redeemer lives. I know that over yonder stands a place prepared for me, a home, a house not made with hands, most wonderful to see. I know that my Redeemer lives. I know eternal life he gives. I know that my Redeemer lives.
Good evening, everybody. It is great to be with you tonight. I hope you've had an enjoyable day. It's pretty warm for October, but I think whenever it's warm, we're waiting for it to get cooler, and whenever it's cooler, we're waiting for it to get warm. So we'll just maybe enjoy what we've got while we've got it. Very thankful for the opportunity on Sundays to come together with the Lord's people and study His Word a couple of times, and very thankful for all of you for being here. Today we're going to continue in our study of the book of Acts. Now, some of you might be thinking, we've been going through Acts forever now, and it does seem like it has been quite a while. We're going to continue through the month of October and wrap up Acts at the end of the month of October. Tonight we're going to talk about Paul in Jerusalem, looking at Acts 21 and 22. Now, what we've been doing is kind of a bird's eye view of the book of Acts. I imagine if we were spending time in a Bible class thinking about this book, we would be able to spend a lot more time on every single episode, every single moment in the narration that Luke is giving us to let us think about all the amazing things that are happening in the early history of the church. We're not able to do all of that. We're hitting some high points and some themes, and so sometimes it feels like we're running a little bit quickly through that. But appreciate you and your attention during our study. What we're going to focus on tonight, Paul going back to Jerusalem, if we weren't students of the Bible, if we weren't really aware of the story and the history of God and His people, we might see Paul going to Jerusalem as just another event in the story. He went to Philippi, he went to Ephesus, he went to Corinth, he went to Jerusalem, he eventually went to Rome. And we might just see it as another step. I want us to stop and to consider tonight what this really is in its significance. We're going to spend some time looking at some continual warnings that were made to the people of Jerusalem. And we're going to consider Paul's going to Jerusalem as probably the last time that God is making an appeal to the entire populace of the city of Jerusalem to turn back, to follow Him, because if you don't, there's going to be bad things coming your way. We're going to spend some time looking at some of these passages, and you'll see them on the left side of the screen. The first one is in Isaiah chapter 1, 18 through 20. Now, Isaiah chapter 1, Isaiah is one of the earlier prophets to the people of Judea, but specifically to the kingly family in Jerusalem. And he comes to speak to them, and he warns them. This is God speaking through Isaiah to the people of Jerusalem. Come now, let us reason together. Some of this might be familiar to us because of a song that we sing. But come now, let us reason together, says the Lord. Though your sins be as scarlet, they shall be as white as snow. If you are willing and obedient, so this is what he continues there. If you are willing and obedient, you shall eat the good of the land. But if you refuse and rebel, you shall be eaten by the sword. The play on words there. If you're willing, you will eat good, and if you aren't, then you will be eaten. He talks about this kind of phrase, this play on words there. Now, thinking about Isaiah and then thinking about Jeremiah, what we have from the very beginning of the prophets going to the people of Jerusalem is continual warnings to them, continually letting them know God loves you, He's welcoming you to be a part of His family, but that means following His law. That means being aware of the poor. That means being aware of the widows and the orphans, taking care of them, not neglecting them. That means doing what's right, not just in your worship services, but also in the way that you treat the people around you. And so this was something very important to the people of Israel that God expected of them, and oftentimes they were neglecting those things. So God welcomed them to do the right thing. Unfortunately, as we continue through the story of Israel, we get to Jeremiah, and Jeremiah known as the weeping prophet, and I think one of the reasons he's known for that is because he sees the impending destruction of Jerusalem. Nebuchadnezzar and his armies are on the march. They're headed toward Jerusalem because of the people's wickedness against God. Jeremiah specifically says, "O Jerusalem, wash your heart from evil so that you might be saved." This isn't just, God would prefer you to act a little bit better. This is everything to do with your salvation. You need to be cleansed from the evil and the wickedness of your heart. How long shall your wicked thoughts lodge within you? Now, I've just included Isaiah and Jeremiah, but you could go through all the major prophets. Ezekiel is dealing with the people of Israel after they've gone to exile, reminding them of what landed them in exile in the first place. You go through the minor prophets, and they're not minor because they're less important than the major prophets, but they're minor because the books are a little bit smaller. And all throughout those prophets in different time periods of Israel's history, you've got prophets that are warning the people of Jerusalem. You need to turn back to God. You are God's city. You are the very place in which God has chosen to put his presence, right there in the temple. You should be the ones that are closest to God. You are in proximity, but it seems like your hearts are very far away from him. So we have these continual warnings to Jerusalem. All the way to the time of Jesus, Matthew 23, 37 to 38, Jesus cries over Jerusalem and says, "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. How often would I have gathered your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, but you were not willing." Jesus wants to be like a mother hen and take care of his people, take care of Jerusalem. But every time that God would send someone to Jerusalem to warn them and to let them know, you can always come back to me. You can always come back to God. What would they do? They would kill those prophets. They would stone them. They would drive them out of the city. They would make their lives miserable because they wanted to do things their own way. And so Jesus says, look, your house is left to you desolate. Luke gives us a little bit more detail over that. And I really like what we see here in Luke. Jesus comes near to the city, and it says that he wept over it. You think of somewhere else in Scripture that Jesus wept? That was probably the first verse that I memorized, just because of how short it was, and at Bible camp, that was a verse I could mark off the list. But we remember John 11:35, Jesus wept. He wept over his friend Lazarus. Here's another instance of Jesus weeping. And what is he weeping over? He's looking at Jerusalem, and he knows that they're going to respond still again in rebellion, even though he is God in the flesh coming to speak to them. They're going to respond in rebellion, and he knows the result. He knows what we see here. The day will come upon you when your enemies will set a barricade around you and tear you down to the ground, you and your children within you. And notice this last line, how important this is. You did not know the day of your visitation. How sad is it that Jesus himself, that God himself came and visited the people of Jerusalem, and they didn't even realize it? How did they treat God when he came to town, when Jesus came to visit? We know what happened. We know the story of his betrayal, his arrest. We know the story of his crucifixion. And every time someone has come to warn Jerusalem about their sins and giving them an opportunity to turn back to God, we see how they would respond. And what Jesus is really recognizing, kind of closer to the beginning of this verse, he says, I wish that you, even you, had known this day the things that make for peace. Jerusalem is rejecting the Prince of Peace himself, and Jesus is able to look forward into the future. Matthew 24 makes it quite clear that Jesus knows that one day the Roman army is going to come. They're going to be completely fed up with what Jerusalem has done and rebelling against them, and they're going to completely destroy Jerusalem. They're going to completely destroy the temple, and then place an edict in place that no Jew can come into the city again for 100 years. And so the people that Jesus loved, his very own people, denied him. They've denied God's plans and purposes for the world, and in doing so, God finally, after all these many years of patience, was willing to allow them to be destroyed. If you're familiar, if you remember John chapter 1, verse 11, we read that the light came to the world. He came to his own, and his own people did not receive him. Instead, they killed him. Another individual that knows what that was like was Stephen. The beginning of the book of Acts, we spent a lot of time, I think on a Sunday night, focusing on Stephen's lesson right in the middle of the temple to the leaders of the Jewish people. And he uses all of this terminology. We went through every single little phrase pointing out that this is coming straight from the book of Jeremiah. All of these insults would have been known to them because if you read Jeremiah, you know the end result. Jerusalem is going to be destroyed. He says, you stiff-necked people, uncircumcised in heart and in ears, you always resist the Holy Spirit. As your fathers did, so do you. Which of the prophets did your fathers not persecute? And they killed those who announced beforehand the coming of the righteous one, whom you have now betrayed and murdered. Now, when Stephen says all those things, it's hard to imagine that he would expect anything different. If these same people had killed all the prophets beforehand, then killed the righteous one, Jesus himself, Stephen actually receives the same exact treatment. And so as we're thinking about this, how patient has God been with Jerusalem? He sent them around 800 years of prophets, of individuals that have called them back to the right track. Please do the right thing. Please do the right thing. He's actually allowed them to sometimes we think of this as a punishment, and it was, but for Jerusalem to be destroyed. But he kept that remnant and sent them into exile. And then when they returned, surely they would know, hey, God really means business, and we've got to do things right. We've got to follow him, because look what he was willing to do. He allowed the temple to be destroyed the first time, And now, after all these many years, we're able to come back and rebuild it. We need to do things right this time. Unfortunately, that's not the way things play out, because God himself comes to visit Jerusalem. Jesus himself comes, and how is he treated? We know that he was rejected and killed. Stephen, Acts 6 and 7, as we read. And then you have to think about the fact that the church of Christ was available there in Jerusalem for decades. Opportunities upon opportunities for the leaders of Jerusalem to then become Christians, to be followers of the Jewish Messiah. We see that many of them did. We see that some of the priests became obedient to Christ, but not the whole system. Not everyone turning to follow Jesus. Now, as we consider these things, this and why I think this is so significant, this is likely God's last appeal to a disobedient people. Whenever Paul goes to Jerusalem, he's the perfect man for the job. He's an individual that has been trained by Gamaliel. He's a Pharisee of Pharisees. He knows the law in and out. He's also spent some time among the diaspora Jews, those Jews that are spread out. He knows the Jewish world. He knows what it's like to be in the center of Judaism, and he knows what it's like to be a Jew that is living out and about in the Gentile world. And now he's come to Jerusalem. This is their last opportunity. We don't have in Scripture any other recorded time or event of a prophet or an individual like Paul, an apostle, going and pleading with the people of Jerusalem to turn to God. So that's why I think this is so important. We're going to spend some time looking at Paul's time there in Jerusalem. But looking at this, we have to realize that God is incredibly patient. After 800 years, who could deny God's long suffering for these people that he loves, these people that he has chosen? But the reason he's chosen them is to fulfill his purposes, and they're just not doing so. They've denied the person he's chosen. They've denied his purposes, but they still want to be his chosen people. We're going to learn, I think, a lot about that tonight. This is their last chance. This is it. This is the man for the job. And so Paul is on his way to Jerusalem, a very, very significant event in the history of the people of Jerusalem, in the history of God's wanting them to be saved. So let's open up our Bibles and let's look a little bit at these passages that lead us up to Paul being in Jerusalem. If you've got your Bible, open up to Acts chapter 21, verses 1 through 14. Paul is making haste to get to Jerusalem. And everywhere that he goes, and we could read that, we're not going to read the whole thing, we'll just hit some highlights along the way. Everywhere that he goes, we see in verse 4, we see in verse 11, everywhere he goes, Paul is confronted by individuals who have been given information by the Holy Spirit, as was available in this time period, to let Paul know that there's going to be some very bad things facing him in Jerusalem. And because they knew it was not going to be pretty for him in Jerusalem, they're begging him, please don't go to Jerusalem. There's a prophet named Agabus, we read about in verse 11, who takes Paul's belt and he ties it around Paul's feet and says, the person that owns this belt, around his own feet and his own hands, and he says, the person that owns this belt, this is how they're going to be treated when they get to Jerusalem. They'll be delivered into the hand of the Gentiles. And so Paul knows this is coming, but he's got his heart set, and the Spirit is guiding him to go to Jerusalem, that this is what his lot in life is now. One thing I wanted to mention before we pass it up. Notice in verse 8, as Paul is making his way to Jerusalem, it says, the next day we departed, we came to Caesarea, and we entered the house of Philip the evangelist, who was one of the 7, and we stayed with him. And we're told that Philip has 4 unmarried daughters who prophesied. Kind of fulfills what we saw all the way back in Acts 2, that young men and young women would be prophesying and dreaming dreams. The Spirit has been shown to be with his people, the church. But notice who this is, and I think Luke is giving us a reminder of who Philip is. Philip was one of the 7. Do you remember those 7 all the way back in Acts 6 and 7? There were 7 that were chosen to have the apostles' hands laid on them, to then be able to administer to the church there in Jerusalem a specific need that had arisen. But one of those 7, we remember, we've already spoken about tonight, was Stephen. Stephen went and he proclaimed the truth to the leaders of Jerusalem. We know that he died, but who was there standing holding the coats of those who threw the stones at Stephen? There's a man named Saul. Who is it that is now being welcomed into Philip's house? That's really a beautiful picture. That's the power of the gospel. Many, many years later, the one who held the coats of an individual that killed your friend is now welcomed into your house as a guest. It's a beautiful thing. So thinking about this, Paul is continuing to travel to Jerusalem, seeing friends and loved ones along the way. And when they come to Jerusalem, we recognize that Paul knows what he's going for. This is not a leisure cruise. This is not going to be a surprise to him. But the Holy Spirit through Paul himself and then to a number of other individuals, have made it known that Paul's fate was sealed. Things are going to happen in Jerusalem that won't be good. When we get to Acts chapter 21, verse 17, Paul arrives in Jerusalem. Let's do a little bit of reading here and spend a little bit of time on this, because I think this is another way in which God is trying to be patient with the people of Israel. We read in verse 17, when we had come to Jerusalem, and if we switch back to seeing the word we, that means Luke, the writer of Acts, is now with Paul once again. So Luke is there knowing exactly what's taking place and chronicling those details. When we had come to Jerusalem, the brothers received us gladly. On the following day, Paul went in with us to James, and all the elders were present. And after greeting him, he related one by one the things that God had done among the Gentiles through his ministry. Now, you'll remember we spent a Sunday night digging into Acts chapter 15, and the last time Paul was in Jerusalem, they spent a lot of time figuring out these details about how do the Gentiles that are living among the Jews as Christians now, how do they need to interact with one another? This is some difficult stuff. These are cultures that have been separated for thousands of years, and now they're being brought together. Ephesians 2 tells us that middle wall of partition has been torn down in the death of Christ, and these two groups of people are being brought together. How do we interact now? And so they spent a lot of time working that out. Last time that Paul was in Jerusalem, and now he's back, I'm imagining excited to see these friends that he hasn't seen in a while. And so he tells them all the good things that God is doing among the Gentiles and that he's allowed Paul to be a part of. Verse 20, when they heard it, they glorified God, and they said to him, you see, brother, how many thousands there are among the Jews who have believed. So we saw in Acts chapter 2, thousands of Jews believing. We see as time progresses, more and more Jews in Jerusalem believing. By the time we get here to Acts 21, James says, look at this. You've been out teaching the Gentiles, and they've been accepting the gospel, and it's a beautiful thing. Look around here, though. There are so many Jews who have now accepted the gospel. But the thing is, some of these Jews are really still leaning hard into their own culture. This is a different type of church than what you're experiencing out at Antioch or out at Philippi, where there's a good mix of Jew and Gentile. This is pretty much just a Jewish type of people, and they are expecting that even though they're following Jesus as the Messiah, that some of those cultural customs that they became so familiar with under the Old Covenant, those things need to be kept. And they've heard some things about you, Paul, that they're not too happy about. So he says in verse 20, the end of verse 20, that they're zealous for the law. They have been told about you that you teach all the Jews who are among the Gentiles to forsake Moses, telling them not to circumcise their children or walk according to our customs. That's certainly not true. That's not what Paul has been doing. He's been trying to alleviate the differences between Jew and Gentile and not putting emphasis on culture. If you're a Jew, you can still be a Jew and be a Christian. If you're a Gentile, you can still be a Gentile and be a Christian. We just have to figure out how to work together in God's house. So these accusations are not true, but James says we need to figure out a way to let people know that these things aren't true. How might we be able to do that? Verse 22, what then is to be done? They will certainly hear that you have come. Do therefore what we tell you. We have 4 men who are under a vow. Take these men and purify yourself along with them and pay their expenses so that they may shave their heads. Thus all will know that there is nothing in what they have been told about you, but that you yourself also live in observance of the law. Now what Paul is being asked to do here is not saying I'm going to deny the New Testament so that I can retake up the Old Testament. Clearly that wouldn't be the case. We know Paul has made that quite clear in the books of Romans and Galatians, thinking about the distinction between old and new. But we do see that they're asking him to do a very culturally Jewish thing to let people know that there's not any truth in those false claims that have been made. And so Paul says, I don't see any issue in this. I'm not going to be denying Christ by doing a very Jewish cultural practice. And so he takes these individuals. He pays for their vows to be fulfilled in the temple. Looks like they shave their heads. Maybe it's some type of Nazirite vow or something that everyone can see. This individual, he's proclaiming Christ. He's proclaiming the Messiah. But he doesn't hate Jewish people. He's doing some very Jewish things right now. Just there he is. Look at him. And so Paul goes through this purification process, and he goes to the temple, and almost a whole week passes before any drama starts up. If we get to verse 27, this leads to Paul's arrest in the temple. When 7 days were almost completed, it wasn't the Jews of Jerusalem that had any problem with Paul. This way to try to appease the crowd seemed to have worked. But the Jews from Asia, those same individuals that were attempting to kill Paul everywhere that he went, and to stir up trouble and to stop people from following Jesus, these Jews from Asia had come because they wanted to be there for Pentecost as well. And seeing Paul in the temple, they stirred up the whole crowd and laid hands on him. And they, as we saw in Jesus' case, as we saw in Stephen's case, now we see in Paul's case, these false accusations are flying. This man brought a Gentile into the temple. Well, he'd been there all week, and that certainly hadn't happened. Paul wouldn't have been dumb enough to do that. But they take Paul, they drag him out of the temple. They are seeking to kill him, verse 31, and he is rescued by Roman soldiers in the fortress Antonia, which overlooks the temple, making sure that the Jews stay in check and aren't doing anything too crazy. We have some centurions that rush down and rescue Paul, because this is turning into a riot very, very quickly. And Paul is dragged back up the stairs into the temple, and the mob of people, verse 36, follow him, crying out, "Away with him." Now, Paul, I think I would have been pretty excited to get away from the danger, but Paul says, hey, this is an opportunity for me to speak. There's a big crowd there. They're pretty riled up, but I think I might have an opportunity to speak with them. And so he asked for permission from the Roman centurion to speak, and after a brief interchange about who Paul was, he said, go ahead, you can speak. And so he speaks to the centurion in Greek. He speaks to the people in their Hebrew language, likely Aramaic. But we get to verse 22, and let's do a little bit of reading. Chapter 22, verse 1. He says, brothers and fathers. Now, I think this is really important because I think this is God's last organized appeal to a very disobedient people. Of course, within the next 20 years of the church being there in Jerusalem, there's still going to be opportunities for people to obey Jesus, to look at the temple in Jerusalem and then look at the temple of the church, to look at the people and the hearts in which God has put his law and given his new covenant, and to make a decision. There's still 20 more years of that. But I think this is God's last organized effort in a very significant place in the temple from an apostle to get up and to speak, at least the last one that we know about. So I think it's important for us to spend some time checking this out. So we get into verse 1. Brothers and fathers, hear the defense that I now make before you. And when they heard that he was addressing them in the Hebrew language, they became even more quiet. And so Paul starts going through and explaining who he is and his story. And much of this we've spent a lot of time focusing on. We saw in Acts chapter 9, and then we've spent even a little bit of time jumping around to other times in which Paul gives his story, his testimony of his faith and how he became a Christian, how on the road to Damascus this bright light blinded him. And it was even evident to those who were going with him, and that he was blinded and needed to be led to the place of Damascus so that a man named Ananias could come and teach him the gospel. Now, as we read this, as we go through Paul's lesson, I want you to notice all the things that Paul gets away with saying. Have you ever thought about this? Have you ever been in an argument with somebody and you know there's certain buttons you could press that could definitely end this argument? If I press this button, things are just going to boil over and everything's going to be upset and we won't be able to continue this conversation. Notice the things that Paul's able to get away with saying, and they just let him keep talking. But there's something that he says at the very end of the speech, at the very end of the sermon, that's the final straw. That's the button that he pressed that turned into an uproar. But it's really remarkable the things that he is able to say, and everybody just keeps listening. Everybody just keeps accepting what it is that he has to say. So let's look for that as we read. We go through verse 6, and he says, as I was on my way and drew near to Damascus at noon, a great light shone from heaven and suddenly shone around me. And we remember this story. Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? I'm Jesus of Nazareth. So this Jesus that many of these Jews who had heard of, some of their family members surely had left kind of the ways of doing things, not sacrificing for sin offerings in the temple anymore because Jesus is that once and forever offering for sin. They know about this Jesus. They know about this individual. He says that Jesus makes this appearance to him. And nobody really seems to get riled up about that. I'm like, okay, we'll keep listening. And he keeps telling them what happened. He obeys Jesus. Verse 12, Ananias, this devout man according to the law, who spoken well by the Jews, came and he taught Saul what he needed to do. It's told in verse 14, the God of our fathers appointed you to know his will and to see the righteous one and to hear a voice from his mouth. And we continue reading, and we've spent enough time on this verse already, verse 16. Now why do you wait? Rise and be baptized. Wash away your sins, calling on his name. It's still not at this point that the Jews get riled up and get upset. So he keeps talking. This next part, verse 17 through 20, I think is incredibly remarkable in the fact of this is something we don't see anywhere else in the book of Acts other than here. And it's also something that doesn't seem to rile up the Jews, even though you would think it might. He says, when I return to Jerusalem. Now you remember Paul went to Damascus, or Paul, he went to Damascus in order to persecute the Christians that were there. He became a Christian there, and so he started teaching the truth, confounding those that were trying to deny Christ. And we're told, I think it's in 2 Corinthians, we're told that the individual that ran the city of Damascus, he issued kind of a lockdown, looking for Paul in order that he might kill him. And so what did they do? They lowered him in a basket out of a window so that Paul could escape. And it seems that he went straight back to Jerusalem. Paul says, I know the truth now. I'm going to go make things right. I'm going to go to Jerusalem and clear all this up. And very soon, everybody will be following Jesus and everything will be good. Well, we see how brave Paul was, but he goes immediately back to Jerusalem. It tells us in verse 17 that he was praying in the temple and he fell into a trance. And he saw him saying to me, saw Jesus again, another appearance of Jesus. And maybe we don't emphasize this one as much, but he says, I need you to hurry and get out of Jerusalem quickly because they will not accept your testimony about me. Now, if Jesus appeared to you and started talking to you, what do you think you would do? I think probably just whatever it was that he had to say, I would accept it. But as headstrong and as brave as Paul was, he decides to argue with Jesus. He says, I know you're telling me to get out of town, but I'm going to stay here. I'm going to teach them the truth. We're going to make things right here in Jerusalem. Verse 19, Paul says, Lord, they themselves know that in one synagogue after another I imprisoned and beat those who believed in you. And when the blood of Stephen, your witness, was being shed, I myself was standing by and approving those watching over the garments of those who killed him. Jesus, I'm the right man for the job. Don't send me out of here. I'm gonna fix it. I'm going to teach everybody about you. And even the high priest himself is going to become a Christian. But then Paul obviously recognizes he needs to obey the Lord. Notice verse 21. This is where the Jews get upset. Everything before this, apparently they're willing to continue listening. This Jesus whom was crucified, that many of them think is just a common criminal, that so many of their friends and family are saying he's been raised from the dead. He is the new way. He is the new Israel. He's the new temple. We now see in verse 21 the thing that riles them up beyond anything else. Jesus said to me, go, for I will send you far away to the Gentiles. Up to this word, they listened to him. Then they raised their voices and said, away with such a fellow from the earth, for he should not be allowed to live. And so the riot starts up once again, and it's at the point in which Paul says it's God's plan for the Gentiles to be a part of the family of God. It's God's plan for them to be in the church. And so as we consider this, it's really, I think, a remarkable thing. God's last appeal to the people of Israel is an appeal for them to include those that they wouldn't normally have thought would be a part of his family. Now, the question is, how do they respond? This is the moment in which they stop listening. And I want us to emphasize this. And what we're going to do here in a minute, I think we have time, we're going to watch a quick video. I'm not sure that I've done that before here, but we're going to test out the new audio and visual equipment just to make sure that works. But one thing before we watch this video, I want us to be aware that these individuals, these Jews, wanted to be God's people. They considered themselves the people that had been privileged to be chosen by God. They had the temple. They were worshiping God in their ways. But notice they wanted to be God's people, and they were not willing to accept the person that God had chosen, Jesus. They also weren't willing to accept God's plan. And God's plan was, through the people of Israel, all the Gentiles, all the world would be added to God's family. They wanted the privilege, but they did not want to follow God's purposes when those purposes had been revealed through his people, the church. So as we consider this, we're going to watch this video really quickly. It's from GBN, a good brotherhood group. And this series that they've put together is really neat. It's called Drawn Towards God. And the video is made for apologetics purposes, to let us know how amazing Jesus' prophecy was about the destruction of Jerusalem. But considering the response of the people of Israel towards towards Paul when he's making the sermon, and considering the patience of God for over close to 800 years, being willing to plead with Jerusalem, do the right thing, follow me, and they're unwilling to do so. Even the Roman response towards the Jews was one of patience and willingness for them just to do things the way that they should do. But I think this is a really interesting video. If you guys could unmute the, I think it's the PC button, and then if you could start it a little bit after the intro, that would be great.
Why do we believe the Bible? because of evidence. Lots and lots of it.
So
We're going to take a
you can
brief
skip the
look
intro.
at just
There we go.
one piece
It just should be that next little,
in particular.
about 30 seconds in or so, that next little notch.
The prophecy that Jesus makes in Matthew chapter 24.
If it won't
It
work,
is,
we can
to
watch
the
it.
casual observer, interesting or confusing. But if you're a fan of history, it is shocking. It is unreasonable. It is creepy how accurate it is. The events that would have had to happen are so unlikely that it's really hard to overstate. Here's the story. First, what did Jesus predict? In verse 2, that the temple would be destroyed, and not only that, but so thoroughly that not one stone would be left on top of one another. And in verse 34, that it would happen in their lifetime. There are a lot more details between those two verses that make it even more interesting, but just sticking with those two bare minimum facts, what can we learn? We know from history that this did take place in AD 70, about 38 years after Jesus said those words. But why was it so unlikely? A skeptic might say, surely it couldn't have been that difficult to predict. The Jews and Romans were always at each other's throats. Eventually something bad had to go down, right? It's true that they didn't get along well on occasion, but before the Great Jewish Revolt around 66 AD, it was a pretty amicable working relationship. Here's the backstory. The Roman Empire was famous for being relatively hands-off, understanding, non-divisive, and even passive, according to scholars. Romans don't go around looking for trouble. In general, they had good relationships with the Jews. This relationship was so good with Rome that 1 in 20 people in the city of Rome were Jews around the time of Christ's birth. Many kind concessions by the Romans were made toward the Jews to keep the peace. Jews were exempted from taxation every 7 years, and allowed to rest on the Sabbath each week as well. They were granted special exemption from pagan rituals, and Rome even minted special coins free of images to comply with Jewish scruples, despite the fact that elsewhere the coins bore images. Jews were not required to recognize the divinity of the emperor as all other people in the empire had to do. They merely had to offer prayers for the emperor's well-being. Jews were free to practice their religion, enjoy their holidays, and follow customs as they wished, as long as they didn't rock the boat. Rome didn't care. So while Judea at the time of Christ was no daycare, it was hardly the war zone that some portray it as. Riots would happen, Rome would put it down, and things would go back to normal. For instance, in 6 AD, Judas of Galilee led a revolt, but it was quickly put down and things went back to normal. In about 40 AD, Caligula tried to have his statue set up in the Temple of Jerusalem. Riots followed. He backed down and things pretty much returned back to normal. Things were relatively peaceful up until the mid-60s AD. And it would take a multitude of simultaneous accidents, incredible bad luck, and remote coincidences for Jesus' comically unlikely prophecy to actually take place in the time frame that he said. What exactly happened? You've probably heard of the main two Jewish sects in the first century, the Pharisees and the Sadducees. While they didn't like the Romans, they were more or less fine getting along with them. During the time of Christ, there was one more group, the Zealots. They were less amenable to working with the Romans, but during the early first century, their activity was largely that of non-compliance, rather than outright violence and rebellion. A couple decades after Christ died, around 54 AD, a more extreme splinter group from the Zealots formed, the Sicarii, or Daggermen. Their policy was to kill Romans and kill anyone else who doesn't also want to kill Romans. It was these people who helped instigate the downward spiral in relations with Rome. This extremist group were more and more attacking Roman citizens, and around the same time, a new hard-line Roman procurator, Gessius Florus, was appointed in 64 AD. He escalated the situation by plundering the temple in Jerusalem and executing up to 6,000 Jews, triggering another revolt. General Cestius Gallus, with an overwhelming force of 30,000 men, marched to Jerusalem to put down the revolt before they could really fortify the city. But he was ambushed, and crucially, he lost his siege equipment. This would make putting down the revolt in Jerusalem take much longer. A huge concern because he arrived just before the October rainy season came. He feared that his supply lines would be cut off, so he decided to instead fall back, giving the Jews even more time to fortify the city and make preparation for war. As General Cestius Gallus retreats, he's caught in another ambush and shockingly takes tremendous losses. Thousands of troops are killed, one of the most humiliating defeats the Romans have ever sustained in their entire history. In a situation like this, typically a tiny nation like Israel would negotiate some concessions from the much more powerful Rome. Rome would also get concessions from the Jews and they would agree to peace. Nobody wanted it to escalate. Nobody except for the extremists, that is. Believing God was on their side, this win emboldened the Sicarii to push for complete victory and all-out open war. Emperor Nero appoints Vespasian as general to take over and crush the rebellion, bringing to bear more than double the number of troops as before. He began quickly reconquering Judean cities and land around Jerusalem, but the city itself wasn't attacked just yet. Before Vespasian could lean hard on Jerusalem, shocking news comes. The Emperor Nero is dead. Roman law required that all Roman commanders had to wait to be reappointed and receive orders from the new emperor before they could take any further action, giving the Jews even more time to fortify. To think that Jerusalem could have been successfully sieged at this point was nearly unthinkable. It was one of the greatest cities in the ancient world. It had not one, not two, but 3 sets of walls, 164 towers, enough food and water reserves to last literally for years, and at the time of the revolt, the temple was transformed into a nearly impregnable fortress, which was sworn to be defended to the death. At any normal time, rulers are reluctant to commit troops to a siege because sieges are notorious for being extremely costly and protracted. But this is no normal time. It's at this point that Rome goes into free fall politically. This is the infamous Year of the 4 Emperors. After Nero's death, Galba takes over and is quickly assassinated, followed by Otho, who is quickly usurped by Vitellius, who himself is also killed. Then General Vespasian becomes Emperor Vespasian. Never in Roman history has there been so much political unrest. Vespasian is emperor, but his hold on power is weak. He needs to establish his authority and popularity quickly, and he knows that the best way to do this is to achieve a spectacular military victory. Luckily, Vespasian has a son who happens to also be a very talented general, Titus. He sends his son to launch the attack. Any glory that he wins will reflect on his father, the emperor. It's now the spring of AD 70. Jerusalem is once again fully under siege. On several occasions, Titus offers peace terms, but they always refused. It seemed that they were at a stalemate. Jesus' prophecy about the temple was bound to fail. He was nearly out of time for it to happen in that generation. The Jews have fortified Jerusalem beyond what it already had been and stockpiled enough food and water to last for years. Nobody realistically expected the Romans to succeed. Titus had no way to feed his large army for long enough to outlast Jerusalem. But the extremists foolishly choose to burn the food supply that could have fed the city for years in order to spur the inhabitants to fight. Now there was no other option. In the end, Titus encircles the defenders with a wall nearly 5 miles in circumference, all around the city, and starves them out. And eventually, 2 of the 3 sets of the city walls are broken through. Josephus tells us that before Titus makes his final assault, he debates about what to do with the temple. Should it be destroyed or left standing? What do you think he decided? Titus decides to save the temple. It was not to be destroyed. Jesus' prophecy is once again bound to fail. When the Roman soldiers break in, though, chaos ensues, and tragically, a soldier takes a firebrand and tosses it into the temple against orders, causing the building to catch fire. Titus orders the fire to be extinguished, but no one obeys him. The temple burns to the ground. But Jesus didn't predict that the temple would be burned. He specifically said not one stone would be left on top of another. Well, the siege isn't over yet. Remember, there were 3 sets of walls and defenders in the upper city still. It is only at this point that they have the nerve to try and negotiate with the Romans. This sends Titus into a rage. He's offered them peace terms over and over again, and they refused. Josephus records Titus's response. You have been incited against the Romans by Roman kindness. We gave you this land with your own kings to rule over you. We maintained your ancestral laws, and we permitted you to live as you wished. Most important of all, we allowed you to exact tribute and collect offerings for your God, and now, like untamed reptiles, you spit your venom on those who have nourished you. This was the Roman attitude toward Jews. They, for so long, were not seen as enemies. Rome seemed to bend over backwards to accommodate them. But the defenders continued to act as if they had some sort of leverage. If they merely acknowledged that there was nothing left to fight for, Jerusalem may have been spared. So Titus, who was previously so inclined to be lenient, now gives the order to raze the entire city to the ground. All that remains today of the once spectacular temple is the great platform upon which it once stood, called the Temple Mount. Jews to this day lament the destruction of their temple.
A little bit more to that video you can check out at home if you'd like, but I wanted to just bring up 1 or 2 points about it. I think it's really remarkable the similarities of how many times God offered peace to the people of Jerusalem, but it always meant turning to him. It always meant following his ways, and most recently sending his own son and saying, if you will follow me, you will have peace, not just military or physical peace, but spiritual peace, the peace that surpasses all understanding. When we see how the Jews responded to Paul, we see their answer to God, and we see how God responds. After 800 years of patience, in AD 70, the temple is completely destroyed, and so many millions of Jews lose their lives because of their refusal and rebellion to follow God. When we think about our invitation tonight, how many times have we heard an invitation? How many times did God send the Jewish people an invitation just to turn and to follow him? How many times have we heard an invitation? The question is, and I think this is very important that Paul and his sermon really brings out to us, is that we can't just want to be God's people without accepting the person that God has sent, the person who is his son, Jesus. We can't just say, even I want to follow Jesus, but then not be willing to obey the words that Jesus has given us. We can't want to just be God's people and have all the privileges of being his people without being willing to follow God's plan. For the Jews, that was being willing to accept that God wanted everyone everywhere to be a part of his family. For us, there's a lot of things that we need to accept. Every time we open up God's word, we'll see what those things are. But our question is, when we see a God who is patient and loving and just, one day there's going to be a time when it's too late to turn to him. It's going to be too late to offer terms of peace because he has tried over and over and over again. On that day when it's too late, that's what it'll be. It'll be too late. So as we think about this tonight, as we think about our willingness to follow Jesus, our willingness to be God's people, if we want those privileges of being his people, we have to follow his plan. If you haven't followed his plan tonight, if you haven't been baptized into the waters of baptism, if you haven't accepted him as your Lord, and that's something that we continue to do in the way that we live our lives, we'd love to talk with you about that and to strengthen you. We have a very patient and loving God, but we have a God that will one day bring justice in this world. And we pray that we will all be those who look to him for salvation. If there's anything that you need tonight, please let it be known as we stand and sing this invitation song.
I am mine no more. I am mine no more. I've been bought with blood. I am mine no more. Jesus is my Lord. Jesus is my Lord.
Just a few announcements before we're dismissed this evening. As we mentioned this morning, a few of the Jim Buckner's in NHC with pneumonia. Betty Rumsey's now home, recovering from her hospital stay. Marcia Simpson, this is Mike Burns' aunt and Ruby England's sister, or sister-in-law, excuse me, has multiple fractures in her back as well as blood clots in her lung. We added this morning Donna Burns. She's been diagnosed with cancer. This is Wayne and Ann Berriman's niece. Tonight I was added Becky Polk. She is to have surgery on her back this coming Tuesday. And lastly, today was the funeral for Nicole Vaughn's mother, so we'll continue to keep that family in our prayers as well. Is there anything else I need to add as of this moment? Some upcoming events. The baby sprinkle for Brooke Davis Polk on October 27th. All are invited. There's some sign-up lists in the back. First will be the Fall Family Retreat, October 18th through the 20th. This will be at Nathan Bedford Forest State Park. All are welcome. And like I said, sign-up list is back there. The Pumpkin Patch sign-up is also back there. This is open to all kids and parents. It will be October 26th. Says that adults will be responsible for their own ticket. Trunk or Treat, October 31st. Please sign up if you can decorate a trunk, and please be bringing candy. And lastly, CYC is approaching. The deadline to sign up for that is November 3rd for anybody that would like to go. Once again, a reminder that the college students love to get mail. Let's fill up their mailboxes with notes of encouragement. Please pick up a list of addresses on the table in the back of the auditorium. That's the last of what I have. Is there anything else tonight? Excellent. If you've not had the opportunity to partake of the Lord's Supper, it's been prepared for you at this time. You can exit to the door to my left, second door on the right. I'll figure it out eventually. But you can be dismissed now as we stand and sing this last song.
Number 635. 635. Tempted and tried, we're off way to wander. Why it should be thus all the day long, while there are others living about us, never molested, though in the wrong. Farther along we'll know all about it. Farther along we'll understand why. Cheer up, my brother, live in the sunshine. We'll understand it all by and by.
Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for this another first day of the week that you've made and blessed us with. We thank you for the opportunity that we've got to come here today and to meditate on the many blessings we have as being Christians and meditating on the love that you've shown for us. Father, we thank you so much for giving us life that we enjoy each day. Our Father, we thank you for the comfort that we can get from the Scripture. Father, we ask you to help us that we can apply those things that we read in the Scripture and the early history of what the Christians went through many years ago. Our Father, we can learn so much and help us to look to you for guidance and know you'll give us that peace and comfort in our lives when we obey your will. Help us to be better examples to those that don't know your word, that we can help your word to grow and spread in this area, and help us as Christians that will be a bright light to others and have to help them to learn more about you. Continue to be with us this night as we go home, and help us to have a good week, and help us to
live close to you as we study your words, and let them comfort us each day that we live. And we look forward to that eternal home that we have with you one day. In Jesus' name, amen.